Matt Joe Gow was born in Aotearoa, New Zealand, and now lives in Melbourne. He has released 4 solo albums over the past few years, and he also works with other artists as a writer and producer. His latest album is the exceptionally good Between Tonight and Tomorrow, which I recommend everyone go and listen to immediately. Hello, Matt.
Hi there, and thank you for your recommendation. I very much appreciate it.
Oh, it's just such a wonderful album, and I'm not sure when I'll ever stop listening to it, which means I've got a backlog of other things, but that's a different.
Visit it, you know.
That's right.
Remind you of a time, and I think that's a wonderful thing. You don't need to stop.
I'm not planning to. And it has 11 songs on it. I'm wondering if there were more than 11 when you started, and that means you had to cull the selection for this album.
Usually I would say yes, but for this one, they were just all the right songs. It's like we got to that exact number, and that was it. I just, again, with the track listing, I wanted it to be succinct and nothing but what was essential, and that's the same with the instrumentation. That's the same with the artwork. That's the same with the lyrics. A lot of space. It's sparse. It's direct, and I guess, yeah, that's even reflected in the track listing. But usually I would write 15, 20, 25 songs for a record, but in this one I don't think so. I think it was probably around that amount, maybe just a little over.
So it sounds like you had a conception for the project, but in itself that suggests you might have edited things without even realizing it to arrive at the 11 without having to bring others and cull them. You've kind of self-edited to that selection.
Yeah, I think each song is the songs are really personal on this record, so each song, whilst cohesive and hopefully tying into the other songs and themes, each song embodies its own emotion. And once I'd painted that picture and delivered that, I felt, okay, that's done. We can offer something else now. And when I got to about that mark of that many songs, I felt that was enough of an emotional roller coaster for people. We can stop there, and the journey had ended, and that song closing in was always going to be the last song on the record. So yeah, there was, self-editing. I edit pretty early, and I have a team of people now that I'll send off songs relatively early.
Right.
I go, But even before I send them, I've generally been pretty harsh on myself.
Okay.
These days, time is, I don't have as much time, so I have to be more stringent. I'm not just firing off demos to my engineers and guitarists anymore.
But do you think it's also that because you've written quite a few songs, you're just sharper, like the instrument is sharper, so to speak?
Definitely. I mean, you'd like to think you improve as a songwriter. I certainly have. And I was saying that to a bandmate the other day. We were talking about how this album had really resonated, and we were really fortunate with reviews. And like yourself, you'd sent me some lovely messages like, can't stop listening to your record, and those they thrill me. And we've had like a fair bit of that for this record in the few weeks it's been out, and feature albums and things like that. And we're sort of thinking like, what is it about this album? And I did say, I was like, you know what? I think we may have actually improved. We may have actually gotten better over the years. I think on this record, it's the most coherent. And that's by design. Some of them I was trying to branch out and be different things, and on this one it's like a very clear idea of what we're trying to do, and it just funnels through, and I think that's what's connecting with people.
And it is a very personal record, as you've said, and drawn on your own experiences, but because you're being specific about those experiences, they are universal. So for this record, your experiences have inspired you. I'm wondering if generally in songwriting, are there things that regularly inspire you? Are you someone who looks around at the natural world, for example, and thinks, I like that tree and I can get an idea from that? Because often people who are looking to write songs or anything wonder where inspiration comes from.
Yeah, it's all inspiration on a daily. There's content for your songs all around you. You can go hunting for it. Used to go to the train station in London. I'd watch people say goodbye and greet and just be around those emotions. But I think for me, when you like, for people on average, when they sort of enter into their 30s, and that's a time when people go through a lot of change. They have enough age to reflect on things, have an understanding of the world. So there was enough that I'd gone through as a human, as an artist, that I could find ideas and concepts that I wanted to convey to people, and I felt that I also had the tools to do it over developing as a songwriter. And you realize some of the themes that other people seem to go through as well, and so I speak about them on the record, and whilst it's cathartic, it also, I think, is the opportunity for it to connect with people. So yeah, a lot of the record I'll take and in your experience, but then in some of the environments that I'm in, you talk about a tree or something like that. I like to paint a visceral picture to start with. You know, if you can put that imagery in people's head, with a shipwreck on the, and you have the visceral image of a shipwreck, and that being a metaphor for relationship or for someone's life. You know, We Are Born, later in the record, I open with there's a cold wind blowing down south, slowly chasing the rain, and from your window you can, so you set that scene. And that, I grew up in that environment. That's the thing for me. That's that environment. So I think your surroundings, for me, play a big picture, and especially in that visceral element, which is so key in songs. I want to paint a picture for people. I think it can help to resonate with the listener.
I often think songwriting requires so much discipline because, you know, novelists have a whole lot of words in which to express something. But in a song, you have some verses, chorus, bridge, and, you know, not many minutes in which to do it. Now, you have a background writing poetry. So I'm wondering if you learnt that discipline when you were writing poetry regularly.
It's so interesting you say that, because that's always what impresses me most, when someone can write a story in 3 minutes, you know, and also the chorus generally is a repeat refrain. So like, you really got 2 verses and a bridge to say a story. And a friend of mine who does it really well, Grant Lee Phillips, of a band called Grant Lee Buffalo from the 90s, sort of old Americana artist. I would just hear a song called Jupiter and Teardrop. He talks about this whole relationship between this young couple, and he eventually goes down in a hail of gunfire. And I just remember being like, wow, he just wrote that whole story. It was amazing. And it's something that I wanted to emulate. Dylan does it well as well, but Dylan has like 10 verses, so he kind of cheats in that respect, but he is the greatest. So yeah, like in closing in, again, as the last song on the record, that's about a whole relationship from start to finish. Like I tried to do that in 3.5 minutes, and you really have to make every word count. Phrase count, everything. There's no fat, just everything has to be poignant, otherwise you just wasted a line. But I love that, you know, I love that about songwriting, and that's almost one of the greatest challenges, you know, get your story across in 3 to 4 minutes. That's a challenge. Yeah.
Do you think now that you have written quite a few songs that you trust your instinct about the right word to choose? Again, back to the discipline of it, because you don't have many words in which to express, say, a whole relationship. So when you're looking at that song and you're thinking, what is the right word? Is it an intellectual exercise of going, oh, I've got to find something to fit here, or is it instinctual, or both, maybe?
It's instinctual to start with, and then I try to step back, gain some objectivity, and use songwriting techniques and whatever I've developed and learned, and apply them to the immediate instinct that I had. You don't want to dampen that fire and that initial spirit, that spark that creates songs, because I think that comes from an emotion. That doesn't come from a technical aspect. That needs to be a release, at least for me and a lot of artists. So I'll try to take that sort of ball of fire, and then you then step back and try to refine it.
Right.
And one of the challenges for me is having written 4 albums and written albums for other people, and writing albums with other people, must be 10 albums or something. I don't want to go over the same ground, and I don't want to repeat the same lyrics. So that is becoming a challenge. In saying that, I have noticed something that I hadn't ever considered early on in my career, which was the opportunity you're afforded in having been around a little while. So now I can homage my own songs and other people's songs that I know. So, for instance, a song called Sweet Collapse on the new record, which is a sequel to Georgia Rose off my 7 Years record. It's further down the road in that same journey. And I can reference the same places. I reference my own lyrics. In Sweet Collapse, I said a river to the sea, times I was in too deep. So that's a direct reference to Georgia Rose, where I mention traveling down these streets alone, like a river flowing to the sea. So I reference myself. Like, that's my one luxury. I can make sequels to my own work. I really am enjoying embodying that. So Sweet Collapse, I even say in the chorus, you heard me write my rose, ain't going back. And that is direct reference to Georgia Rose. So that was a wonderful experience, finally being at a place where I could start to do that. So it has opened up some new ground. I was concerned I was running out of material.
I think you're absolutely allowed to refer to your own material. I remember once reading a quote from Sting years ago where he said, it's totally fine to plagiarize yourself as a songwriter.
Well, Bowie does it with Major Tom. So I wanted to create characters that I can reference, and maybe I'll reference Georgia Rose again a third time down the road. I think it's a really cool thing. I like when Bowie does it. So yeah.
I really liked what you said a little while ago about the idea of the ball of fire. So take the ball of fire and try to refine it. I think you said it's like that's a really visceral concept, and also amazing and descriptive in and of itself. So more a statement than a question.
It is. It's just a really powerful. No matter how terrible your initial concept is, it can still be such a powerful thing to you because it was maybe a release of emotions. Maybe you're in pain, maybe you were joyous and celebrating, and so you wrote this and you expressed that. So that is such a powerful thing to be able to do or to have. They don't always make their way onto records, but I think that's an important expression in and of itself. And then if you want to then refine it, then you have to then take to it as a songwriter, and then later as a arranger, and later as a producer. But that initial spark is the most important thing, because without that, you don't have anything.
I also wanted to acknowledge, because you mentioned the song Sweet Collapse, from a language point of view, the paradox inherent just in that 2-word phrase is great.
Right.
So did that come to you as a concept, and you thought, oh, that's curious, what am I going to do with that?
Well, I felt that juxtaposition encompassed the story. The story is like, because so much of the album's bittersweet, and that is at the heart of so many good Americana country songs. Bittersweet. There is sad, depressed, lonely, lonesome songs. There are joyous songs, but the ones that really resonate with me are those bittersweet songs. Those have always been my favorites. So that song in particular is doing that. It's talking about the journey and the losses that we've taken. But we've only taken those losses because we loved and we had those people in our life. And so essentially, that song is about continuing on, and maybe we're going down, but we're not turning back. So I felt that that line worked well.
And given your care with language, because it's throughout all of your work, not just on this album, that you're careful. I don't mean to sound like it's overworn or anything like that. It's more that you are deliberate with your word choices, because you're trying to convey a story in a short period of time. did you grow up reading a lot? I mean, obviously we mentioned the poetry, but were you a big reader? Have you always been interested in language?
Yeah, always. Yeah. My mother would buy me books all the time. Like those were sort of birthday presents, Christmas present, always a book involved. Language is important. My parents both spoke very well, always have. So language was just an important tool to express yourself.
Mhm.
Poetry, I started really young, and I felt that even at a young age, I thought I had potential. I would get those little gold stickers, and that was something to aspire for as a young kid. So yeah, words have always come naturally to me, and yeah, and so when it comes to writing music, it's again, it's one of the it's hard to even explain, because in that sort of early period we talked about, like a ball of fire, I'm sort of throwing words out there when I'm singing, and sometimes in that flow state the words may work, but you don't really know where they came from, and then you sort of come to, and you have maybe that line, take a hold of me now in my sweet collapse, and you're sort of like, oh, okay, let's try and write a song around that. And
Right.
so some of those lines, I don't even know where they came from. You maybe even apply the meaning after.
Yeah, right.
Sometimes.
And you mentioned also a bit earlier about songwriting techniques. So did you learn technique primarily from listening to other people's songs? And I imagine you did, but have you also formally studied
Yeah,
songwriting?
I studied somewhat, obviously English, and then at university. So I have techniques and just simple things, and understand where alliteration is used, and understand phrasing. And so those concepts are important. And then I just break down songs, and I break down lyrics, and uh, what it is about that song. So, and now, I mean, now I give songwriting courses. I've done a few at universities, talking about, what I feel makes a good song. And so now I have more understanding on techniques, but I think early on it was a more raw approach, and I probably relied on my producer perhaps at the time saying, oh, yes, no. And I was sort of just firing up songs, right? Whereas now I can sort of refine the songs myself and go, no, I'm pretty sure this is going to work.
Yeah.
That's the benefit of having more understanding of songwriting techniques.
I did not know that you have taught songwriting. That was not in your bio. So this is
Well, I mean, it's not a full-time thing, but I have lectured at universities, and I'll be doing that again next month at Aotearoa University. Just lectures, and I'm at Tussock Country Festival. We're doing a songwriting seminar. So yeah, I'll give songwriting seminars, and hopefully, if you speak to the artists that I'm working with, Kerryn or Fleur or Jeremy, who I'm working with at the moment, they mention, like, I do talk a lot about technique. So usually when I'm altering, working with Fleur's song, I'll say, here, we should do this because the alliteration is nice. I prefer if you come back to this line, that phrasing works well. Here, you're in this tense, you're in that tense. So I sort of do that stuff now. And it's not to say I wouldn't have done it when I'd started out, but I'm just quicker at that now. So yeah.
When you're teaching songwriting, do you think that your students tend to have common obstacles, I guess, or put obstacles in their own way?
Yeah, I mean, that's always the difficulty about taking something so raw and personal and then shaping it to be able to connect and resonate with people. Obviously, you don't have to do that. You can write songs just for yourself in your bedroom, but is anyone going to listen to them? So when you come to a songwriting course, you're inherently, I believe, you've come there saying, how can I write songs that people want to hear? You can write songs that people don't want to hear all day, and if that serves you, that's fine. But if you want to create something that people want to listen to, that's still unique to you, still authentic, and still serving yourself in terms of being artistic and expressive, well, then there's a bit of skill involved there. And that's what I'm trying to instill, like a bit of discipline around that, whether it be talking about techniques like we mentioned earlier about establishing a sort of visceral element, which is important, sort of paint a picture so people can go there, establishing an emotion, what you're trying to say in the song. And I talk about this with a lot of the songwriters. You can be esoteric in regards to your song, so people don't have to understand. But if you don't understand, it's really hard to write a song that you don't understand. Do you know what I mean? Like, you want at least somewhere to hang your hat. You need to know what's going on, the framework, because otherwise you're just lines, and it's very hard to connect with just lines, random lines. That doesn't often work. But if you can have your own skeleton there, you can sort of make the song, and then you can display it, and people might not understand it, but it holds together better when you have a concept of what you're trying to say.
Yeah, I'm quite fond of saying to people, tell the damn story. What it comes down to.
Yeah, exactly. That's the same thing. It's like I said, yeah, what are you trying to say here?
Yeah.
Does it make any sense? Or that contradicts what you said earlier. It may sound cool, but it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. So that's all great advice for people who are learning songwriting from you. Is there a piece of advice that someone gave you that has really stayed with you?
Wow. I mean, I don't like to quote my father much, because me and my father don't get on that well, right? But in many ways, he was a brilliant man. When I was very young, he said to me, you want to write a song that connects with people, you should write about loss, because everybody's lost someone.
Wow.
That always stuck with me, just in regards to, writing from a place where people can connect with and resonate with. And so, loss is one of them. See, my father said that to me. Interesting, huh? Like when I was maybe 13 or something like that.
And no doubt at that age, it would have a lot of impact, because you think, oh, what am I about to lose? Is that what he's trying to tell me?
Yeah. Well, then you do go through your life and you start losing people, and you lose, and then you go, oh, right, okay, I get what you're saying there. But it's not as simple as that too. Obviously, you can't just write a bunch of songs about loss and then people too miserable, you won't even get played on the radio. It's a precarious dance, and you can't fall over the edge, you see. And that's that bittersweet that we talked about earlier. If you do that, then you can sort of deliver some of that loss and some of that hope at the same time.
Well, my advice to anyone living in Melbourne who's interested in songwriting would be to find out where you are teaching songwriting. This is not very good advice. And I don't want to take too much of it, because people should go and take a course with you. So I'm going to conclude by asking you if you have a favorite book or author, whether from the past or something you're reading now, that you'd like to tell us about.
My favorite book of the last few years is probably a Japanese author called Murakami, and he wrote The Wind-Up Bird Chronicles, which is a really large book. And I remember once I went to the library, and I love going to libraries actually. And I went to the library and I was looking for a book that would just be relaxing, because I just wanted to chill out. And so I saw this book that on the back said, a gentleman loses his cat and he goes searching through his neighborhood to find his cat. And I thought, oh, this sounds chill, like, tales and adventures. And it ended up being this psychedelic, mystery, supernatural, wonderful and horrific voyage. There's a chapter in there that I believe the Japanese translator refused to translate. He said it was too graphic, and Murakami said, no, you will translate that word for word. So anyone who's read the Wind-Up Bird Chronicles will know the chapter I mean. But that book really resonated with me as one of my favorite books of recent times. Yeah.
And there's a character who spends a lot of time down a well. And
read the book then, have you?
I have read the book. It is an epic, and the well has stayed with me, Matt.
Yeah, it's sort of a really harrowing and also elements where it's kind of sweet. You sort of don't know where you are, and you don't know what questions will be answered, but it's like a David Lynch film in a way. So, but I kind of enjoy that sometimes, those really psychedelic, crazy rides. I'd never read anything like it. So yeah, he's a great author, though. He has a few sold Norwegian Wood and stuff like that.
Well, that is a great recommendation. You have given lots of great information about songwriting and creativity. Matt Joe Gow, thank you so much for your time. People can find your music streaming services. They can come and see you at a show when you're back from New Zealand. Hopefully you'll be, as you're about to embark on a lovely tour to New Zealand with Kerryn Fields. So hopefully we'll see you back in Australia for some shows after that.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks.